And,
Oh, you're all Tony. You need to get
yeah,
on.
Tony's, there we go.
Okay, we have video, we have audio. Ready when you are, Chair Jaffa.
Okay, we'll call the May 3rd meeting of the Advisory Planning Commission, Port and Commerce Advisory Board together. And we'll stand for the pledge, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will the clerk call the roll?
Okay, roll call. Hughes.
Here.
Paquette.
Here.
Atwood.
Here.
Smith. Wolkers.
Here.
And Chair Jaffa.
Here.
Okay, you have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. Citizen comments? Anybody signed in? If not, we'll go to anybody that wants to speak in the audience.
Nobody is signed in, Chair Jaffa.
Okay, thank you. So we'll go to approval of the agenda and the consent agenda, and on the agenda we have one resolution, and on the consent agenda there are the minutes.
Chair Doffa, I'd like to make the motion to approve this consent agenda and a consent agenda.
I'll second it.
So a motion is made and seconded. Is there any discussion? I would like a clarification on the agenda. We do have in our packet some substantial documents regarding the sewage plant, and I don't see that on our agenda.
Under the administration report.
Okay. Very good. So call for a vote.
Okay, voting on the approval of today's agenda and consent agenda. Wolkers.
Yes.
Atwood.
Yes.
Paquette.
Yes.
Hughes.
Yes.
And Chair Jaffa.
Yes.
Okay, the agenda and consent agenda have been approved, and approved on the consent agenda are the March 8th regular meeting minutes, the March 22nd special meeting minutes, and the April 5th regular meeting minutes.
Very good, thank you. We have no presentation, awards, and we can go to item B. Administration report is in page 4 of your packet. And I know that our city manager is busy with other things, and our assistant manager is off with other things. So if we can, the assistant harbor master.
We've included a project list and report within the packet. Do you guys have any questions off of that list?
I would bring this up. I don't know if you're going to have the answer. There is a laydown that we got that was presented to you regarding the ad hoc committee and the heat loop. Are you up to speed at all on the city activities in support of that grant application?
No. I have a little bit of knowledge on it, but probably not to the extent that Norm would.
Okay. Well, I don't really think it's my place to present on that. I can talk about it in comments, so. Okay.
Oh, Chair Jaffa?
Yes.
I was going to say that the heat loop project is part of the resolution because it's on the list of priorities. And I was going to ask you if that was your intention to talk about it then?
That'd be great.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. But one of the things to the clerk and all, the administration is a big part of this. So. Okay. Anything else from the administration? We have. Do we want to talk about the lagoon project under the administration report?
Well, it's listed under there. There was a request for the updated information that was in the council packets versus it's also the report from R&M through CRW that they did recently, and Stephen included both of those in there. I'm here to answer questions if you had it on what's in the report. Most of that is operational versus I'm not sure what we're doing as far as PACAB on an operation basis, or we're looking under infrastructural. I'm not sure where we're going with it, but anyway, I'm here to try to answer questions if you have them.
That's also on the priority list, I believe. So it may be appropriate to discuss that under the priorities. I don't think it would change anything, as long as Doug is here for the duration of the meeting.
Yeah, if you'd rather wait and talk about it during the resolution.
What's the board prefer?
As long as we get to it, yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
I think it falls outside of what's in the legislative report. I mean, I just have some questions about what's in here.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Why don't we go ahead and use
Do that now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so, just make sure I've got this stuff in front of me the right way. All right, so in our packet on page 8, so this was the excerpt from Council's November 2022 report, the Public Works report in that packet. So it's a little confusing, and I don't know, this would be a question for the clerk, if in the future, as we're documenting dates in these packets, if we would include the year, because it makes it a little confusing here. Where it says the study is complete, the third-party study was presented by R&M at the October 25 council meeting, that was actually in 2021. And so then,
These are questions directed towards administration.
correct,
I think the discussion would be to involve responses rather than procedure.
well, that was just something that somehow needed to get covered. So in one, in the blue, it says we're finishing the data collection once we get 3 days of no rain. It's been raining a lot. And so that was in the packet in October of 2022 and also November of 2022. And then this whole report disappeared out of the packets. So I'm just looking for the updates on these numbered items and whatever happened, right? You know what I'm saying?
Yep, sure. Sure, on that same page at the very top, that's what went into the city council packet, and following this, when we pulled this out, that was when we found out we got the $2 million grant for sludge removal.
Right.
From there, the items are then listed through. The top 2 items aren't listed. They were not all the way completed because of that bad year of rain and the landslide last year. They are
Right.
planned for June now.
Okay.
To get them done this June.
Okay,
All the other ones have to do with the, they were all listed as you see on, you continue down 3, 4, 5 on the bottom of the page, the things we should consider implementing.
Right.
And so we are looking, we went through almost all of those to implement, but back at the top of page 8 are the answers. I mean, we're really, if we're gonna do those, we are certainly looking for money to do those, but we would sure like to do them when we drain the lagoon to do sludge removal, which was planned for 2025. Now, to do that, this grant, we're finding out timelines. It may come up that we gotta do it next year, depending on the grant timeline.
right,
The plan was 2025, and at that point, hopefully, we have other grants, other funding to not only do that, but once you drain it, we wanna put a new liner in it.
right, exactly.
But to do the new liner, you have to pull all the
All that up,
aeration.
right.
We need a helicopter to pull all those 40 biodomes out, and then once we get the new liner, reset them all in. So obviously, we don't want to keep draining and doing it. The
Right.
plan was to try to do all of those that we can fund. We have, the fine bubble is a big one we would like to get in there. Whether we replace the coarse bubble with the fine or add to it, that's still being done by CRW, and we've got 3 engineering groups working on that. What's the best way to do it? More air is better, but you can also overdo it and then nothing's working right.
Right.
So we're trying to get that all dialed in of what's the best way. Right now, it's just adding fine bubble to what we have and not taking out the coarse bubble. The first thing they'd said was to replace it. Replace the coarse bubble with the fine bubble. So we have some varying opinions from 2 different engineering groups. So we're trying to get what's the best way to do it and be able to keep the best dissolved oxygen going through that lagoon. We're meeting our permits, we're meeting our levels of DO all the way through. That's not an issue right now, but as you guys know, whether we get, there's so many factors from population, from summertime, from rain. Rain is huge. When we have those big rain years,
Right.
it really adds into that mix. So all the way through, we're trying to make those adjustments and what can we do to do it. The biggest thing we have, and odor is going to be the biggest thing no matter what on the lagoon. We're trying to keep it as low as we can and as earthy as it could be. There's always going to be a little odor, but ideally not the stench, right? When the airlines broke down 2 years ago, we just got caught. I mean, it was a bad thing. It froze and we couldn't add, and that just sat there and got worse and worse and worse till spring. Since then, we've had a few, but not terrible. I mean, I go out and talk to several people out there and we get varying reports, and whenever we get a call, we're gonna run right out there and find out where, what, and why. Did something happen with our calcium nitrate? Did our drip stop? What's going on with it? Because
Right.
we're adding that,
Right.
not only out there, but at lift station 3, we add it and have a drip always down here at lift station 3 that's constantly going in to reduce any of that. But you have to remember, spring and fall, that temperature difference, it's coming.
Right.
If we get that good warm temperature, what that does is does a turnover in the lagoon. As that water in the lagoon warms, it'll turn that and stuff will float up. And we try to pull that stuff as quick as we can, but right when that happens, you have a week or so that we're working diligently to get it out, but you'll smell something there and it won't be the just earthy smell.
Is that that dredge you were hoping to procure would solve that problem as far as removal?
I'm not hoping to procure any dredge. I don't know where that came from.
What's in here?
Oh, yeah, that's one of his suggestions on there. But when I talked to him about it and said, how are you gonna run a dredge through all that air equipment? You want a floating dredge, and that's what they have in Palmer. Palmer has now eliminated their ponds, but they had only.
But they were only 5, I thought they were 5 feet deep.
Yeah, they're really
Let's let
not
people
deep.
finish their questions.
So anyway, their lagoons were way shallower, and they didn't have the aeration that we have. They did floating aerators. They were able to then go do basically a vacuum dredge, sucking out whatever they could out of there. Ours is 15 to 20 feet deep. And we have so much equipment down in there and hoses going up through there to try to do a floating dredge. When I talked to the engineer after he produced this report and asked him, how do you want us to do that? I mean, you suggested here, and he kind of got back to me after thinking about it a week. He said, yeah, that won't work. I can't justify doing, we can't. I mean, it just won't work in there. So we're back to then, when we do dredge, it's drain the pond, scrape it out, it's basically squeegees and suck everything out and deal with the full-on removal. And when we do it, ideally we do both this lagoon and the one across the bay. We want to do them both at the same time if we can, but 2 million 5 years ago when we were trying to get this through isn't the same as 2 million now.
Right.
That's why we're looking for other funding to do those things. Everything that we do, we have to do, we're trying to keep up, but we also have, like everybody, where we get that money to do that. How do we do it? And how do we raise more rates? We're trying to work through all the things, keep it so we have the residents still being able to pay what we're paying, but it's definitely a deal. We have that landslide to contend with last year. That was just awful. I mean, the folks living out there was even worse, obviously, but we had to take the boat out there, check it, do our reports, everything, but what if something would have happened out there during that? I mean, operationally, and I think with this report and with what this stuff does, I may be getting off it's good information for everybody, but it's operationally what's going on, and I'm glad to talk to whoever about those things. But as we get in PACAB and what really at PACAB do you guys, what's your vision to do? Are we looking to get into operations?
We'll talk about that.
you know, where are we at?
Yeah, we'll talk
You know,
about
we're
that.
talking about infrastructure of trying to get it, so if we can, we certainly want to get these things we need, whether it can ever go to a different lagoon, a second lagoon, a treatment plant. Those are big things to look at for future, what we're going. I mean, part of this big report in here, as he goes through it, yeah, there's gonna be these ups and downs. What's the population gonna do? You know, I did look up populations, and right now, and I just getting census data. So whatever the census said is where I'm at. But 2000 was the biggest year. Since then, we've declined a little bit. Doesn't feel like it. I mean, it really doesn't around town with, why do we have even more shortage of housing? It's just a constant drop, but the numbers, and I brought them, but anyone can just look them up, but it gives you the numbers from 2000 was, the high was 2826 for the population in 2000. I'm sorry, my glasses now, 2828 was 2000. 2010 was 2693. 2020 was dropped again to 2584. But the estimated one for 2021 came up a little to 2625. So until just last year, the last 20 years, we've declined a little bit. But how representative is that? We have more cruise ships. We've had visitors, and even 20 years ago, folks that have been here through the huge party things we used to have at 4th of July. There's a lot of people here. There still is, but man, our last 4th of July was so really, in my opinion, was very awesome. We had very nice controlled, more of a family atmosphere. It was really nice. But as far as stresses on the lagoon or on our system, where are we at? And so I think we have to look at that, because that's part of justifying our grants. Where's our population going? The study that he did based that we would be increasing 4.5 per year up to, most of the numbers he put in there, they were based on 2041, and that increase is going up about 4% per year. It's not a huge increase, but it is an increase, if that was the case. I don't know what the case is going to be, neither does, we're all looking for that.
I have a specific question about the numbers.
Sure. Fred?
Yeah, you're using a census, right? Well, we got how many hotel rooms and how many B&Bs
Right.
and how many charters, and these people are coming in using the sewer system. And the businesses are using the sewer system. So, and the RVs are pumping into it.
Yeah.
So if you use the census, that's just the number of the census of people here.
Agreed.
And the real number of people using that system is probably maybe twice or 3 times what that.
Through the summer, there's definitely some higher rates, right?
Well, even year-round, if you average it, you'd come up with a higher population using it.
Right, and they designed that system for, right now the assumptions are 3,000 people plus 1,000 now. That's the assumptions that they've been going under as far as what's it been using right now. But when we talk about cruise ships, visitors, fishing charters, all those things, those aren't really a huge change from what we had. We've had a lot. Cruise ships could, maybe that jumps up, but when you go to the cruise ships, the ones that are a port of call, they stay on the cruise ship. There's an awful lot that they do their waste and their bathrooms right at their rooms there. They don't have a hotel room. Hotel rooms are full, right? B&Bs, I mean, it's hard to get. So those cruise ships, when they come in, a lot of them, they're either come in 10 at night and out at 4 in the morning on the bus, or they're, if port of call, we like to get a port of call, right? And we've been handling those not much different over the years as we go. And I think we've had ups and downs through the years where, of course, COVID, right, drops down. But, you know, there's a lot to go through, and I'm not saying we don't ever need improvements at all. We need to try to keep up on these things, operationally for sure, but in the bigger picture, in the future, what do we think we're gonna need in 2041?
Linda's been waiting.
Yeah.
So my objective is to figure out how the city of Seward can abandon that lagoon eventually. I mean, not today, obviously, but with forethought and planning, abandon it for some kind of a wastewater treatment facility somewhere inside city limits. And I think that solves a lot of problems, right? You don't have to go out there every day, because if the road falls apart, I mean, you know, we don't know what's happening with that, and that's a lot of risk. You said Palmer got rid of their lagoons. What did they do instead?
They're struggling right now with it. They tried to go with a lot of the different, a treatment plant area within they're smaller ponds, but they go through an infrared process going through. They're having a ton of trouble with it right now. They're trying to dial it in, but they went without one of the clarification ponds that they had originally designed. I think they're going to end up having to put that in, and I hope that solves their problem, but it's one of those money situations, I'm sure, that they got to that point. They still have some issues, but the big thing they have property.
Right.
They can be
Right.
way out. Their
Right.
plant is not bothering anyone. It can
Right.
smell to high heaven.
Right.
It's not really getting to anyone.
So they relocated too?
Yeah, they're out of ways. We got to go to their plant and tour it a couple years ago, and a CRW brought us out there, set up a tour that we could go check out both their old and their new, and it was very interesting to see. And ideally, I mean, Linda, you and I sometimes aren't right in line with all of our ideas for sure, but I'm certainly in line with you there.
Yeah.
I would love nothing more than to have it all taken care of in a treatment plant. Now, just everybody be aware, that's not cheap.
No,
It's
it's
not
not
cheap to
cheap.
put in, and it's not cheap to run, but I'm with you. I would love to not have to drive out
Right.
along that mountain all the time and worry about
And you
what
get
if we
rid
do
of a
get
whole lot of
accident?
the environmental issues. You know, you don't need, you don't have to, you're not worrying about the rain the same way. I mean, all of that stuff changes.
There's still a certain amount, but yes, I would agree with you. I'd love to see that happen sometime in the future.
So,
Board
I'm not-
Member Hughes,
yeah,
excuse me,
go ahead.
Board Member Hughes.
Yeah, I think some of the discrepancy in the decline in numbers can be directly associated to people taking their year-round rental property and converting it to B&Bs and Airbnbs and not needing to rent it out year-round anymore. There's
Still
drastic
people
change.
here.
Yeah.
And so I think, what else do you do as far as, what numbers do you use, right? You have a census that goes out and counts through the summer, and they count where they're at, transient or not. I mean, we have at least a baseline number to look at. Yes, there's variables, I guess you could call them, but there's been variables all along, and they may be different, but it's just not something that we've doubled in population, is what I'm trying to get at. We've kind of held steady for the most part.
I did have one other, and then I don't have. I note a paradox on their data report. Now, the rest of it's been very informational, very good. But on the weekly averages of the BOD, it's higher than the monthly averages, and that doesn't make any sense, data-wise.
Yeah, it's a fight we have with DEC a lot. We do one sample a month on a lot of these different things. And if that sample passes the daily requirement, right on, but it didn't pass the weekly. So we're listed as a violation for weekly or monthly, depending, sometimes it passes daily and weekly. It's the same sample. We go out and do it. If there's a real issue, we have to deal with that, but we have to then include in our monthly report, discharge monitoring report, that, hey, we did our sample, here's what it did for the daily, and here's what it did for the weekly, but it didn't make the monthly, and this is why. And so every month we have to explain that, and goes through, they check it off and say, okay, that's where we're at. Testing is not cheap, and we can test and test and test. Typically what we'll do is, if we had a couple that, way out. We ended up, first thing we do is contact the lab. Is there anything that could have happened here? Why is this so, this is not just a little bit high or high, this is like, well, they switched numbers. And we had to have the lab then re-report to DEC, but we still have a tag on our note, because that sample didn't quite work. What we'll typically do then too, we're gonna resample right away and send them another one. But these are, $100 for every item when we go through, and when we start adding those up, it's a lot that we do every month. But we really try to work those through, and We don't make every single one, and that's the typical one that we fail is the weekly, monthly. It says the way it's written.
I haven't heard if you have any questions, Wayne.
No, I don't have any questions currently. What would you like me to respond to?
Not at all, I just haven't been looking over there to see whether you've been asking, just giving you an opportunity, so.
Thank you.
Linda?
So going back to aeration for a minute, I just want to recap this because for the public, I think it's important to realize when you guys did, and you weren't here when the last dredge happened, correct? That was still WC. And it was still Lauren Lehman, I believe, consulting.
Okay.
And when they did the dredge, they changed the aeration. And that's the piece of it, I think, that some of us may have forgotten. So I think that is the explanation for why, because you've heard me say this and other people have heard me say this a lot. It worked perfectly for 25, 30 years, never stank except every once in a while in the spring it would belch. And so that stench lasted maybe 12 hours. It was not an ongoing, you're killing us with your smell, right? And then it started to go anaerobic. It was a process of about 3 years before it really got bad. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, we're all going to die because we're breathing hydrogen sulfide. They did the dredge and they changed the aeration equipment. They changed it. They didn't put back what was there. They improved it. But ever since then, and this is what I've been trying to make clear to people, ever since then, the lagoon has not behaved the same. So I think R&M is on the right track when they talk about making changes to aeration. And I think that the aeration issues are what causes it to smell in the wintertime and to allow it to freeze over, right? Water won't freeze if it's moving. But if there isn't enough air in there, which is what actually makes the biologics work, right? That's what makes the chemistry work. If there's not enough air moving in it in the wintertime, then it will freeze. And then it will stink because the biologics haven't worked. So I really appreciate you bringing us up to date on where things stand. I think it's really important that we not let this thing, because it is out of town, right? And so if it isn't stinking and there isn't anybody like me here running around being a gadfly about it, nobody's going to think about it, and years are going to pass, and funding that could have been perhaps pursued isn't going to get pursued. So that's why I just got my foot on this pedal, and I'm going to keep it there, because I really think some of this federal money that's coming for infrastructure, I think it could be gotten if we were to get our act together and identify, right? That's why I was pushing in the legislative priorities to get something, get it in there that we get a study of what new type and where could we put it.
Okay. You'll get another cut at this, Board
Yeah.
Member PACAB.
So,
I thank.
you want to move on? That's fine.
Well, I thank Public Works Director for his input, and actually, I think.
Answer more if you need to.
I'm not running you off, Doug. I think when we get the priorities, I'll go ahead and say it now. To do what Board Member Paquette suggested, and that's to seek improvements, you have to have a grand idea of what you want to do. And is that something your department can generate without having to hire a consultant, saying, okay, here's what we've got, as this sludge lagoon, and here's where we could move to. This would be a proven technology like Soldotna. Soldotna's got a treatment plant in the middle of town, and nobody complains. I don't know what it costs. I think at the last meeting I threw out a number like $50 million, but is that vision something your department could have in a paragraph form, saying if we had all the money in the world, this is what I'd like to do?
I think it'd be easy enough to say this is what we'd like to do. And we've already kind of spoke that we'd like to have this processing plant, have it here. You still got to have an effluent, right? So it's still got to go out, partway out the road somewhere to be able to get into the deep water. Right now the effluent is about 300 feet down, 300 feet out. And then we have to do mixing zone tests out in the bay, or all around that every month. So there's still some things you have to do, but as far as what we could design for Seward, I think if you don't go out and have whether a consultant or an engineering firm actually put it together, you end up with a project that you're trying to put money toward and you don't have all the engineering you need to do it. There's a lot more to the processes, say in Soldotna. I lived over there for 30-some years. They had different things. They had a huge chlorine leak. Evacuated city blocks around there. They don't use that chlorine anymore there. They discharge into the Kenai River. Totally different regulations now versus the bay. Way more stringent. Not a bad thing. I mean, I wouldn't mind having things even cleaner. I don't know that, I mean, you go to any plants and you see some of these advertisements where they'll drink that water. I don't think any of us wants to drink out of that, but they obviously get it out. It looks crystal clear, nice. What all they've done to it and what that costs, I don't know as you get there. But I think without having full engineering to do it, to actually get, that's what you usually need is when you say you have a plan and you're going to get grant money, you literally have a plan.
Okay.
You know, you have a blueprint and an estimated like a engineered price.
Yeah.
So I have a very general question, sort of a mile-high question, and it sort of follows on Chair Jaffa's thoughts. I don't know what the best technology is. I'm a lay person. I'm just thinking about this pond that we've been using. I assume it's still a good technology. I don't know if I could just ask your opinion. Is what we're currently using an old, dated, or substandard technology, or is it just something that requires maintenance and it's fine?
Well, it's something that certainly requires maintenance like anything. So would the new plant. Any type of plant is going to require a lot of maintenance. However, there's thousands and thousands of lagoons very similar to this across the nation. Different temperatures, different climates. Everybody's a little different. There's a lot in Alaska that have it. It works. Let's say we had, let's say Resurrection River area, there was a big place out there that was flat and didn't flood that we could put something out there. It'd be a lot cheaper than building a plant. You know, the idea of a lagoon, when it works and goes through, it's removing an awful lot. Is there a way to, whether this lagoon, any lagoon, put a headworks building in first? And a headworks building, what that would do is remove most of the solids. It's like a belt press type of roller. Sometimes they're a screw pump. That's what Palmer put, a screw pump type in there. But you have to deal with that, and there's smell to that. You don't want to put a screw pump right there along the road or right here along the road. You want to have a spot that you're maybe an enclosed building, so those costs are a little different as you do them. But a lagoon, to answer your question, they're very acceptable ways to treat sewage. You have them anywhere from a farm who has a small treatment facility of his own. And when I say a farm, I'm talking, hundreds of acre farm that they have, and they do their own septic treatment pond that they're doing those things. And then you go all the way up to some big cities, and I had a list somewhere, just the state of Michigan, there's like 485 lagoons there. They're certainly not unheard of. Are they the top of the line technology? Probably not. Some of them, when you get your cost benefits, they're a pretty good system for a city community to use. So ideally it's location, being able to utilize that, and can you pump out to it? I mean, we're pumping 2 miles right now. So, there's all those things that you could look at variables. So versus if you were going to be in town, similar to Soldotna, I think Stephen brought up the Ray building area across there. And was that an area that you could put it? If you looked at, say, the Soldotna model, which is fairly enclosed and has smaller clarification ponds and they're all under roof, would that be a possibility? The good thing is all your sewer's coming right there right now. You would have a headworks building in a building, which they have there, and they're able to contain the odors. When you go in the building, it's not nice. I mean,
Right.
I've been in that building and they used to store their little skid steer in there. When you borrowed that, it was like, maybe I don't want to borrow that bad. So, you know, there's just different ways to look at it. I do think a lagoon is a very legitimate, very good way to process sewage. I mean, based what I've seen, obviously aerated, right? When you have some anaerobic ones that are just, they're just sitting there letting it do what it does, because it's way out in the middle of nowhere. Fence it off, done. You know, it's kind of like when you have your honey wagons, which have been decreased over the years, and folks here in Homer know that it's not cheap getting your septic pumped out. Where do they take it? Soldotna or Anchorage, because DEC doesn't allow many more sewage ponds to go in to dump those things in. They have a set amount, so you had somebody with some forethought over in Soldotna that bought up like 6 pump companies, honey wagons, and he does pretty well, and they come over here and they'll bring a pup with them, a tanker pup, and pump hopefully 3 people at once. But those are the struggles you have, whether you're a municipal or whether you're on a resident. It's a cost. And so I think it works, it's just how to make it work. I hope I answered your question and didn't roll on too much.
Go ahead, Linda, Board Member PACAB, please.
I was just going to say to Councilmember Atwood, normally there's nobody around those lagoons. And so that, when they put it out there, that was the point, right? There was no, Penny was the only one out there. And so they put it out there, there's no one there. Now the whole place is populated. And so I have to come back to Palmer for a minute, because when we did the tour of Palmer back when our thing was anaerobic, there were houses right up to the fence line, right? Completely right up to the fence line. And they were very proud of the fact that people didn't ever have problems or complain. So do you know what motivated them to abandon those lagoons and do something else?
I don't know all the facts of the Palmer one, but I know it moved.
Yeah.
I know at least what I was brought to, there was no houses around it at all. It was out of ways and had its own area there.
Right.
Maybe Wasilla? Did you go to Wasilla?
No, but this was the Palmer, this was definitely the Palmer lagoons. There were like 2, and they were huge, like 5 acres apiece, and they were only 5 feet deep.
Yeah, it sounds like the same lagoons, but
Yeah.
there was no houses right around there
Yeah,
that I went to.
interesting.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and why? You know, and why did they have to move to a different system? What wasn't working? And, I mean, they weren't even able to make their numbers, let alone where it's at now. They had pretty bad odor problems, but who's complaining
Right.
if you don't have
And
somebody there?
then my last thing about numbers is, I wonder if there's a way to get either from the chamber or some other tourism entity, the visitor numbers. Because there may only be 3,000 or a little under 3,000 people that live here, but on any given day, from May until September, there's 20,000 people in town. Quite, I mean, if you were to calculate all of the rooms, and we've had like 4th of July's where the count went up to 40,000, 30 to 40,000 people over those events, you know.
Right. I'd love to get those numbers from the chamber. If you see them or get them, I think that's a good number. If I remember right, we got up to about 10,000 last year for 4th of July, if I remember
Yeah.
their total with the population here, what they felt. So, yeah, it jumps regardless,
Right.
in the summer, especially 4th of July.
Right.
I'd ask you to save that thought and let that be a topic or discussion under our priorities list, and move along with, unless there's some other questions of the administration.
Fred happens.
Fred?
Well, just a quick comment, the RVs pay to dump. So you could get a count of the RVs that are dumping in the system, correct?
Kind of.
Yeah.
They don't pay to dump. I mean, it's part of their camping fee.
Oh, okay,
There's no
sorry.
fee station there anymore, it's part of the camping fee, and the way it got to, and over the years, it got put into the tariff as we charge, right now, I think it's $1.50 per night per camper at the campground.
Okay.
But we don't collect for, if you have a
Right.
camper, you have a camper and you're dropping off, but the whole idea was, years ago, people were dumping alongside the road in the ditches.
Yeah,
We don't
right.
want that either. We would rather, we'll collect what we can from the camper visitors at that rate and use that to pay the system that.
So you know how many RVs are out there renting, And
Yeah, we have a pretty good account.
Yeah. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is, I don't know how much engineering or thought, it's gone into the fact that you're pumping fresh water, sewage, into these ponds, and then the effluent going out is going down very deep in the bay. And the temperatures and the salinity change, of course. I think the salinity goes up. The temperature, it gets stable after a while, but it goes down somewhat from the surface. But that fresh water wants to get to the surface really fast. And it goes up. This effluent doesn't stay where you're pumping it out at the bottom. There's some sludge that settles out of it, but a huge majority of it is going up until it gets equal salinity to the water around it. And I've been flying out the bay, and this is probably when there's a rainy event or you get a lot more water, but I've actually seen quite a large plume of discolored water. It's right off a low point of ways. So I'm assuming that it's fresh water rising up, just like the fresh water full of silt coming out of the rivers will stay on the surface. Sometimes halfway out the bay, a big boat will go through it, and it's only 6, 8 feet deep. But it's a fresher water, brackish water that's floating on top of the salt water.
Sure.
So has that been addressed at all?
You know what, we're so regulated by DEC on everything we do out there. And when you start talking about the effluent going out into the bay, you're talking about a drop in a bucket. When you start looking at the amounts of effluent versus the amount of water in the bay that's moving in and out, you've got a small thing. For you to actually see a plume that came from the effluent, that's a pretty tough thing. By the time it rises up and goes through and spreads its way, we're having to test that all the time, but it's a huge amount out in the bay.
I don't think DEC knows everything that's going on. I've been here for almost over 50 years, and I've noticed changes in the bay and the water, and the plumes I've seen were in the vicinity of Low Point, and one of them went halfway across the bay and almost to the beach at Low Point. So it happens, but I don't think anybody's watching for that. That's all I gotta say.
What's the size of the discharge line from the sewer lagoon?
I believe it's a 30-inch line.
Just a single 30-inch line, PVC or?
I believe it's metal. I think it's ductile iron.
Okay, well, if you could stick around then for our priority list discussion, we might have a brief discussion about utilities in the priority list. Okay. If there's nothing else?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
One more thing, if
Yeah,
I may.
Member Walker.
I heard in your discussion you were talking about helicopters moving the aerators when you empty the pond and then putting them back in. How many aerators? There's 3 different sizes.
You're talking biodomes. The
Okay,
biodome,
biodome.
there's 40 biodomes that all have to be reset, so pulled and reset.
How heavy are they, each one?
I don't know the exact, there's big concrete bottom on them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe they're a couple thousand pounds each.
Have you thought about using a extended crane to lift off what you can reach from the side to cut down the amount of helicopter time, because that's affected by weather, a lot of other factors, and if you're talking 2,000-pound lifts, you're talking a pretty expensive chopper, so.
You know, part of what we do and we have to do all the time is we have to go by bids. And we have to get this work done by contractors, by the best bids. And when we get the best bids, they're utilizing the best pricing they can get to get that bid. You know, to say that you can't reach them with a crane, all of them. You can reach probably a couple, but by the time you mob a big crane out there that has enough reach to even reach those, you've already got a helicopter that's gonna have to lift some of them. It goes fairly quick, but it's a cost. You know, so regardless which way they would decide to do it, we have to work with them. And I mean, when we go through these things, none of this is done without just no thought to it. There's a scope of work, here's what has to be done, here's the parameters, it goes through all the bids. It's a big thing we have here with city and government itself, it does usually cost us more than what somebody could do, because we have to put it out to bid.
So the contractors are the ones making those choices?
We can make the choices on the parameters of how
Yeah.
to do things, and we can look at those things, but we also look at it, we want the best value, the best price to get that done. Whether they can do it with a crane or a helicopter or whatever it is, they'll have to go. There was a decision last time back in 2015, that was the best way to do it.
Yeah.
It was the quickest, easiest, and most efficient way to do it, was using that helicopter.
Board Member Hughes.
I actually can answer your question, Fred. I know the size of the pond out there. I'm a retired heavy equipment operator that ran a lot of cranes. And there's no long-reach crane that could reach that far out there to do all that. It would crash into the lagoon.
There are some, but expensive.
They're not in Alaska, are they?
Yeah, they
Oh,
are.
okay.
Today they are.
I don't know where they'd stage. That's the only thing.
It
don't know how
would
they could
cost so much
stage
money to
close
load that
enough
crane
to-
in. You'd probably have a civil project to establish a pad to hold that.
That's
thing.
exactly it, yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. We have the Alaska Railroad report. Board Member Atwood, if you could step outside of your board role.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I would be happy to give the report for where I'm seated, if that's acceptable.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you. So you have a report in front of you. I write these somewhat in advance of the meeting, so some of the numbers have changed. We've had 71 port dockings as of May 3. And this last Spinard Builder Supply shipment, which is mentioned, the train departed yesterday, 29 carloads bound for Anchorage and two for Birchwood. But anyway, very robust freight activity. I currently have some Crowley barges receiving, seasonal certification and maintenance work, and alongside the USS Lake Champlain. So you'll see some young sailors around town. We'll have that ship until the 6th. And as I've mentioned earlier, our cruise season includes 90 ships. The first one arriving on the 8th. We've got a lot of work to do to prepare. And then you see the train dates, both for the Coastal Classic and also the cruise trains. Additionally, we're going to be doing some cleanup work on the 5th. I think we're going to beat Super Saturday by a day, so that's hopefully we don't get more snow. But anyway, we're looking at doing some cleanup as part of our preparations for the season around the Terminal Reserve. And also, as noted previously, the passenger dock project is essentially on hold. But I do have some media here. These are QR code cards, so if you want to see graphically what the design looks like, you can do that. It will take you to the site. You can pass those along, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any Board Member PACAB?
Can you give us a little background on the pause on this?
Oh, on the dock project?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we just had a variety of issues come up, and they're not entirely related to supply chain or cost increases or negotiations with the contractors, but I think all of those things put together. And trying to then go back to the legislature for approval to bond for another $90 million. We want to make sure everything is in good order and correct and will meet our needs. I say our needs, the community's needs. And that would be a multi-purpose dock designed in a way, built in a way that won't displace customers in as few as possible anyway, keeping the port operating. As I've said, we've got very, very robust freight business going right now. And so anyway, there's a whole host of issues, and we're going to go back and with this strategic pause and make sure we're doing it the right way. That's a long-winded answer, but that's the best I can give you.
Yeah,
Member Hughes?
appreciate it.
Yeah, just a quick question, I think you can answer this. We all know that the cruise ships, they project their schedules a couple of years in advance. Have you seen any reports that the trend is going down, or will it increase?
That's a good question, and we expect the numbers to continue to increase. You are aware that, you know, there's a dock project that's being undertaken in Whittier, but it just seems as though there is enough to go around, and the trend has been just year over year increases in cruise passenger numbers, and we anticipate that. So that's the short answer.
The total for the project now is 250 for the dock?
So we were looking at the original 60 and then going back for an additional 90. So that would be a total of 150.
Okay, so that's the first question. The second, and I think it's fair for each city to consider their position, and we represent Seward, so I clearly ask whether Seward should consider the activity at Whittier with the new cruise activity, which is privately funded, and the potential further improvements of the dock in Anchorage as something we should really have on our radar, and maybe focus on what improvements or attractions that we can offer. Is there a potential competitive problem?
I don't think it's that great, frankly, as a turnaround port, the way we're situated, the passenger levels that we can move in and out. Whittier has its own, you know, bottlenecks, so to speak. Double ship days, good. I wish them luck. Good. Anchorage has not been. Anchorage is all about cargo. So there could be increased cruise ship passenger traffic there, but I'm an optimist. Of course, you know, I have my own bias because I'm from here, but I think our future looks very good.
Good. Yeah. Well, I would hope so. And I would just say that because I think we need to stay looking ahead, never rest on our laurels or where we're at.
I've heard about these 5,000 passenger ships. Do we have one on the calendar yet? Do we know?
Oh, so the answer is no. We don't have quantum class vessels on our calendar.
Is that what they're called?
And they would be, yeah, approximately upwards of that number that you mentioned, 4,500 or so. No, we would have to right size our facility. And that is a goal, and that's what we were looking at. And this 150 number that was mentioned, that would include a substantially larger terminal building. But again, putting all of that together, building a longer dock while trying to serve cruise ships every summer, and also then, you know, receive a larger class of vessel and not have a tremendously undersized building. So there are just a lot of things that have to happen. And so we're working on those strategies. And yeah, so anyway, the answer to your first question is, though, there is no quantum class vessel on our schedule.
Okay, if there's nothing further, we have no presentations. We have one resolution in front of us that we discussed during our work session. Could the clerk read the resolution into the record?
Okay, Resolution 2023-003, a resolution of the Port and Commerce Advisory Board of the City of Seward, Alaska, providing input to City Council on the 2024 legislative priorities.
Is there a motion to adopt?
I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2023-003.
And a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, there's a motion made and second. On page, what is that,
38.
38, is the resolution that we talked about, and the priorities list after all the whereases. We have 14 items. If you remember from our discussion, we had asked the administration to include a couple items in here. And remember that these are not listed in any sort of hierarchy of importance. Would the administration be available to comment on this priority list?
I could probably make a little comment for you.
Yeah, please.
Sure. On the priority list and the list you were given, I did listen to your meeting, your work session. I went on the YouTube or whatever it was on to listen, to go through, and it seemed like most of them, as you guys went through them, you were in agreement with most of them. It's just what else can we add? And I think that's what I see from PACAB is, what do you see that's not here that is an important project to the Port and Advisory Commission here to do, for this board to add, or hey, this isn't, heat loops wasn't on there, right? So you want to add that. Those are things that you guys went through and spent a lot of time on them, which is fine to go through, but really what do you want to add is what I try to get. I think the city and the departments and the other planning and so, everybody's kind of trying to put input into, and everybody's putting theirs in, and this is what's meshing together. So what comes out, and I think for PACAB, there's already this list that's in there, right? What more do you see that you want in there? And so I think you guys did that at the end, to add, I assume those were the ones toward the end that you guys talked about that, hey, this is not on there, could we add that? And so from an administration point, I see that you've gone through and done those projects to add them in, and unless you had something different to add in beyond what was there, then I think you did a pretty good service there of putting some things together. You know, that's the input I think really that you're gonna really drive at council, is to say, look, you forgot this, or this is a huge priority from our end, can we add that in? And that's, looks like what your resolution did.
Appreciate that. So it's music to our ears, I think.
Chair?
Yeah, please.
And then after speaking with Harbor Master Regis, he felt that coupling 9 and 11 together would probably be a good move. And
Float
we had-
extension project in harbor for Z-float and construction of new harbor master's office.
We'll have a few bonds. In '21, we had a bond come up that was paid off. '27, another one for the MNOP project will be done. And then with the float extension, with that additional revenue, that should be more than enough to pay for that, those two projects.
I wonder how we would word that.
Well, I think you could just put it, if you took it and construction of, but I'd like to take just a minute and think about that strategy. I respect the harbor master's view that they're both in the same category in the harbor improvement. I think that anyone, I think our goal here is to list projects for future discussion. And if I might, on a broad approach, and quite frankly, our current condition, if this goes to council and council approves this, they hand this to a new manager, that could be an immigrant, new to our community, and saying this is what the community considers as important topics. So whether they're together or independent, I don't think would make a difference as long as they're both listed. But did Norm have a reason for, I don't completely understand.
I think he felt like just coupling those together at the same time and sort of wrapping that project all together was a great opportunity.
Is that something that could be funded at once, together, in scope? I mean, I would think a new harbor master's building is $20 million or so, and What is Z-Flow?
That was my understanding. Z, he ballparked it maybe at 5 or 6 million.
So a $30 million package, $30 million package. Does the board have some thought?
I don't have a problem putting them together. My only question would be, I don't know how state and federal funding works, and I don't know if it would be easier to get part of it if they work together, or easier to get all of it if they are together. I leave that to you guys to know.
I would lean heavily on Norm's decision with that.
Right.
If he has a lot of knowledge in this area.
Right.
If that was the direction he wanted to go, I feel 100% charging behind him with that.
So admin's suggestion to us is that we,
Put those
as we
fundos
hear,
together.
modify this resolution.
Yep. And we do have some bonds coming up. The revenue bond is coming up in '27, so we'll have to move forward with that Z project to keep that rolling for the next
Thank you.
term.
I look at it as, you guys are supporting the project as it is or combined. I certainly defer to Norm on Harbor Project, what he
Right.
thinks, but at the same time, this still has to go to council.
Right.
Of course.
Right, so you're supporting it either way, so if you combine them or leave them, there's that chance at council too, as a department, he's putting these in here to go through, he could combine those and say, I would like those together, and that's possible to do at council, but it probably helps him out a little to just have it supported here, that's.
I would move to amend the list of priorities to include the current 9 and 11 by just adding an and construction of a new harbor master's office. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
That was a race there. Okay, is there any further discussion? Let's vote on that amendment.
Okay, so we're voting on the amendment to combine items 9 and 11 to read float extension project in the harbor for Z float and construction of a new harbor master's office. Voting, Wolkers,
Yes.
Paquette,
Yes.
Atwood,
Yes.
Hughes,
Yes.
and Chair Jaffa.
Yes.
Okay, that amendment has been approved, so the main motion as amended is back on the floor.
Okay, thank you. So the items, go to the board,
Oh, no, I thought
okay?
Fred had his hand up.
Okay, thank you.
Before we vote on the main agenda item, I'd like to make a comment. Number 4, is pretty much stating that, okay, we're not gonna have a jail, we want unless the state funds it or takes care of it. So then, down at our new public safety faculty, we don't mention a jail. So what if the state doesn't fund it fully or fund it so that we have a jail? Can we really function without a jail available? And then, so I would think that we could add potentially a jail if the state does not provide funding or adequate funding in the public safety building project. Because right now, we're leaving a hole there that we could lose a jail and not really have a jail. We should really get comments on this from the police chief or somebody. But it's, I would find it very awkward if the city had no access to a jail, if the state did not adequately fund one or provide one, and we built this public safety building without one. It doesn't work for me as far as public safety goes.
We would need a motion to amend if we're gonna.
Yeah.
I can maybe help a little bit of information on that if you like. On the Department of Corrections, I know that the administration did meet with the Department of Corrections at the state, and that is an ongoing talk that they're going through, and they're working through what do you do, what if this closed for whatever reason, that could they house folks at Wildwood, and who could they house, and what could they do, or not Wildwood, at Spring Creek,
Creek, yeah.
and then would they transfer some to Wildwood? those things are all being operationally taken care of one way or the other. They are trying to get, the problem we have with the jail right now is we take all the state arrests also, and we're to the point, the city can't even keep enough staff, let alone afford to do the things we're doing. And the shares, and it wasn't just Seward, it was, there's like 5 or 6 communities that are in not a lawsuit, but a big, huge discussion with the state on getting those things corrected. I think that what they've got in here, they're dealing with those things as they got them in, but I kind of, this is what the police chief and those have already worked through, is these suggestions that are in here as they're in here, and they certainly aren't just dropping out that they don't know that, what if. That they have their contingency plans already planned in and are currently constantly meeting with corrections over at Spring Creek to make sure that happens one way or the other.
I understand everything you're saying, and I know that stuff is all going on, but the way this is written, it is a part of our public safety building if it needs to be down the road, and we already discussed this, that if we had a jail, it would be best in the public safety building. So I see the number 4 is what you talked about, negotiating with the state, trying to get the state to give us adequate funding or provide their own jail or whatever. And then I see number 11, or excuse me, number 12 is a public safety faculty without even a potential for a jail. So that's the only point I want to bring up, and believe me, it's beyond my pay grade to give you how to reword this to where it would cover my concern, but.
Board Member PACAB.
So I think, Councilmember Wolkers, I think we're okay, because all of this stuff's gonna take time, right? So I think the point of number 4 is important, and it just should stand there on its own. And right now, because we don't have the answer on the jail, we just leave it off, because this will be on next year's list, and at that point, maybe we will know, and it will make sense to add the jail to it at that point. But I think we've got that. I mean, do you feel like we've got the time to?
I don't feel number 12 excludes the jail.
Okay.
I feel you've got a public safety building there that could include a jail, doesn't include it or exclude it.
At this
And I
point,
think,
right.
you know, working through these, I do think that the full funding, number 4, is a big deal, that they're really working hard and have been for the last few years.
Yeah.
And I think, in my opinion, you're covered pretty good here, because you will have further discussions on when, let's say there is not a jail that came in out of number 4, it didn't get funded. Number 12 still has to come in and have those discussions, get designed, get built,
Right.
get figured out, and at that point, you're gonna figure out, do you need a jail or do you not?
Right.
And most likely, I guess there might be one in there. You know, if this building was to be done away with and a new public safety and city hall, however they do it, you still have to cover those needs. So I think those are good thoughts to make sure you keep ahead, because you want to be able to at least know that something's going to happen. But I don't think 12 excludes it at all.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate that comment, and I think you're correct. I personally think that the administration wants number 4 in there as a throwdown, to essentially say that the $600,000 a year that it's costing to maintain the jail is unsustainable by the city of Seward, and therefore we want the responsibility transferred where it belongs. I think that's what that statement says. Okay, is there anything else on this priority list? I think I really appreciate what Doug said. I think we did try to make this a broad enough document to show a vision, and if anything else, I think that's what PACAB can do. We're only an advisory board, and we hopefully are a venue where people can provide comment, and we can provide those to the city. And of course, the city can move these around any way they want. And we as a board have spoken to the city what our review is, and that's all it is, it's our review.
I don't remember from our last discussion. I know we discussed the idea of a new city hall or a refurbished city hall or something, but I can't remember. It's not on this list. Did we decide not to put it on here?
I think we did.
Okay,
Not at this time.
okay.
What about
Yeah.
yours?
We're challenged by the council to give them ideas on what the city needs to do or pursue, and then it's up to them to decide the direction they want to go. And I think number 12 does not preclude at all the possibility of a jail being at a later date. My council is saying, hey, the negotiations fell through, we're gonna need a jail.
Okay. So, with there no further comment or questions by the administration or the board, we call for the vote.
Did you want to talk about this while we were in this section?
I can, or I can do it at the time.
Either way.
Thank you. Well, there, you have I will back up just a minute. You have a laydown that came to the city regarding the heat loop, which is item 13 on our priority list. And you may be aware that there is a presentation to PACAB by the ad hoc group coming up regarding the heat loop project. This is a really simple summary from a very long. This is the actual amount of paper that we got from Department of Energy to fill out. But we've been granted a $315,000 preliminary project grant, and it's very ethereal in its approach. It really will not build a project, but it will develop the things that are needed for the project. In the end, the goal would be to have a design package complete, I would say a signed design package, ready to hand to a foreman or a contractor to build. And I think that's a big step forward.
Chair Joff, do you happen to know when that presentation is supposed to happen? Is it at the end, or during the hiatus, or what?
Carl, pardon me, Board Member Hughes, I got so many meetings right now. I'm not exactly sure. There's
It should be on our May 17th
that's a 17th
work session.
work session.
Okay.
Heat loop update.
And our joint meeting is on the 8th, correct?
Yes. Well, no, it's on the 22nd.
22nd.
Our ordinance to reword how the board is governed
Oh, that's a city
is on
council
the
meeting
8th.
on the 8th, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, please.
I'm just looking at your laydown and what it is, and it supports your addition of the heat loop project on here. So I think as far as this resolution, this just kind of goes in support of it.
Right.
And so that shows you, and you do have it on here, so I think it's a good thing to it's included in the packet now, so it should be good to go.
Okay, so we'll call for the vote on the resolution 2023-003.
Okay, voting on the approval of resolution 2023-003 as amended. Wolkers,
Yes.
Atwood,
Yes?
Paquette,
yes.
Hughes,
Yes.
and Chair Jaffa.
Yes.
Okay, that resolution is approved.
Very good. Very good. Okay, so informational items, citizen comments, administration comments,
None from the harbor.
talked out.
115, I like it.
We can drag it out if you want. Okay, Board Member Atwood?
Yeah, comments, very good meeting. I'd like to thank the Public Works Director for showing up and answering our questions. I have actually learned quite a bit, and I think I learned I really don't want to micromanage sewage treatment. My question about the lagoon technology, it seems as though if we were to really work on meeting potential expansion, maybe we might have to look at another technology just because of the real estate situation that we're dealing with. That's just a thought that I have. Thank you.
Board Member Walker.
Yeah, thank the administration for answering my questions and the details. See you guys next time.
Well, this might be my final, it is my final board member comment period. I do appreciate the administration coming by and giving us input on what is community concern, the lagoon system and other areas. I've enjoyed 5 years on this board. I've met some pretty amazing people with diverse input, and I believe this board has worked exceptionally well, and I hope it continues to do so into the future. I'm an idealist in some areas. I am a firm believer in the development of the heat loop project, not just for the city buildings, but for the town site. We could be an exemplary community for the world with our huge thermal basin out there. No one says it's going to be cheap, but it's real. There's already communities in the world that are doing the same thing in northern climates. And the potential, unfortunately, I'm part of that generation. There's some older fuddy-duddies that don't want to make changes, don't like it, but it's a proven technology, and it would really be beneficial to all of the citizens of this community. But I will be there for the work session, but I will not be able to attend the joint work session. I'm taking my grandson to Michigan. He's going to be working for a minor league team there this summer.
Oh, fun.
And he's going to be staying at Grandpa's brand new refurbished house. So, anyway, thank you. Thank you all for your help, assistance, and guidance.
I'm going to back up just a second and offer any comments to the floor.
Yeah, so you had a couple of questions. I was watching online, I couldn't make the beginning of the meeting, sorry about that. So a lot of the things that's on your priorities list, they're like, I think the first 7, there's money out there, it's coming, it's just gonna take a little bit. So that's great. Couple items, by combining the two. So that is about bonding, one bond for both projects. That was the big thing there. We had talked about it, and to us, that makes more sense than trying to go out and get 2 different bonds. Bond one time for everything, get it all done. So, I know it's probably not the right format for it. Yeah. For any questions?
Your staff has done great, but the acting manager, Regis.
Not yet, not active.
Well, close enough. My mind, you are. All right. Thank you, Norm. Okay, Vice Chair PACAB.
Thank you, everyone. I think this has been a good meeting. So just to review, we have our quarterly report to council on the 8th. And you'll be going and doing that? And we are not required to be there? Or our ordinance is also on the ballot that day, right?
If you're asking me as the chair, you're required to be here.
Okay, all right.
If you're asking me for a parliamentarian, no, you're not.
Okay, so as many of us that come on the 8th and as many of us can come on the 22nd. On the 22nd, we have to have 4. It's a requirement to have a quorum at the 22nd meeting at 5:30. I wanted to thank the Public Works for all the work they did on Low Point Road. Cleaned out all behind the Jersey barriers at the big landslide and at the second landslide, and then the third landslide, they sort of built Jersey barriers out of boulders. It really, I think it was timely, because some of them were just kind of flying out onto the road. So that was great. And yeah, I look forward to the work session in May, and then our hiatus, so thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, I enjoy participating in this group and discussions for the city of Seward. I have tremendous respect for the people who are deeply involved in the day-to-day activity here in Seward. and the great impact that they make on the lives of those residents of the community. Serving as a member outside of the city, I take a real pleasure in being able to help where I can. The current topics in Seward are actually dynamic. Of course, we have a vote we're all waiting for the result on, but there are a whole lot of other things, as always, that are right on the verge of great success or tragedy, depending upon how much you push. You can never really let up the gas, but the one thing that I think, and I am fortunate to participate in a number of different groups, as many of us are, is the decorum, civility, and integrity are what make this government system of ours work. And in all of our discussions, remember that we represent someone to someone else's benefit, and courtesy, even with disagreement, is important to our success. So I know I'm trying to speak to a group beyond this group, because I think everyone here understands that. But there's such a division in our society. It's something that we have a responsibility to keep in the public attention, is that we need proper decorum and civility, even with the disagreements. Okay, thank you all for coming, and we'll adjourn at 1:22.